The first father-son duo in NBA history was supposed to be this warm, feel-good moment, a family milestone, a story the league could celebrate. But once you look a little closer, it stops feeling like a fairy tale. It feels colder than that. What actually happened looks less like destiny and more like a case study in leverage, one that's still paying dividends. ESPN's reporting, especially from Ramona Shelburne, paints a very clean picture. LeBron didn't ask for anything, no pressure, no ultimatums, just a nice, thoughtful gesture from the Lakers. They figured he'd appreciate it. So what are the Lakers here? Lucky beneficiaries of a family reunion? Or hostages to their own superstar? Because the story falls apart the moment you rewind to draft night. Bronny James landing with the Lakers at number 55 wasn't just a late pick. It was a perfect example of the gap between what we're told and what actually happened. On one side, you have this official media line, pushed most clearly by ESPN's Ramona Shelburne.
I don't think LeBron asked the Lakers to draft Bronny.
Oh, come
I
on.
don't think he or Rich Paul
That is ridiculous.
actually
said...
said...
That is an unbelievably ridiculous
So wait a minute,
concept.
are you then saying, if that is true, are you saying that Jeannie, Rob Pelinka, and everybody did that on their own?
They're
Yes.
like, here, LeBron, we're
I'm
drafting.
telling you.
Now, hold on.
You're
I'm
telling us
telling you
what?
they did.
Let's take it at the premise that that's true.
Okay.
Did they do it because they thought he was talented or because they thought LeBron would like that?
I think they
let's
did
do
this
this and
because
impress
they thought LeBron would like that.
Okay.
LeBron had no involvement. The Lakers acted on a harmless assumption, and everything unfolded organically. On the other side is what independent analysts and people who understand how NBA front offices actually work have been saying all along, that this explanation collapses under even minimal scrutiny. The idea that this was all passive, accidental, or benevolent is a brain-dead interpretation that ignores the aggressive, documented leverage exerted by Clutch Sports Group to engineer this exact outcome, and ignores years of precedent and the very real leverage Clutch Sports has repeatedly exercised across the league. Calling Ramona Shelburne's position naive would be generous. Calling it analytically bankrupt might be more accurate. What follows isn't speculation, it's a breakdown. Draft night reporting, past examples of LeBron's influence, and the incentives that shape how NBA media covers powerful players and agencies. Because the level of control on display here is remarkable, to the point where a respected journalist is willing to stake her credibility on a narrative that strains logic just to preserve access. That alone tells you how much power is in play. The "we had nothing to do with it" framing isn't just misleading, it's a fabrication meant to soften what was actually a very direct exercise of influence. And it highlights a bigger problem. Access journalism at major networks often means sanding down uncomfortable truths, while independent media ends up doing the real work of connecting the dots. Because when you do connect them, the picture is clear. Bronny James wasn't drafted because of spontaneous goodwill. This was the end result of a multi-year strategy, market suppression, contractual leverage, and careful narrative management. The so-called Australia threat alone makes the idea of non-involvement statistically and logically impossible. Once you see it, the idea that LeBron was just a bystander doesn't just feel wrong, it feels implausible. If LeBron truly had nothing to do with this, draft night would have looked normal. It didn't. And the smoking gun came live on air from ESPN itself. Bob Myers, former Warriors GM and someone who understands front office dynamics as well as anyone, casually dropped a detail during the second round that changed everything. According to Myers, Rich Paul was actively calling teams with second-round picks and delivering a very specific message.
Rich Paul's calling teams, don't take Bronny James. He's telling them, do not take him, okay? Saying, don't take him. If you take him, he's going to Australia.
That alone blows up the hands-off narrative, because that isn't passive, that's interference. Agents who are letting the market play out don't threaten 29 teams. They don't issue ultimatums. They don't turn a second-round pick into radioactive waste unless they're steering a player to one exact destination. What Clutch pulled off here was textbook draft steering, just executed with an aggression you almost never see for the 55th pick, and it worked. By floating the Australia threat, Bronny became undraftable for everyone except the Lakers. No GM is burning a pick on a player who's already told you he won't report. The risk is too high, the upside non-existent, so the board clears. No trades, no competition. Bronny slides exactly where he needs to 55, where the Lakers are waiting. What's truly wild is that they reportedly had to warn teams not to draft him at all. For a player this limited, you'd expect him to slide naturally. The only reason he did didn't is obvious. Teams weren't evaluating Bronny James, the prospect. They were evaluating Bronny James, the leverage point, the name, the consequences, everything attached to it. And even Shelburne acknowledged that teams like the Suns, Mavericks, and Warriors had interest. That's the key detail her narrative can't survive. If the Lakers were the only team interested, if this was all just a feel-good move they independently decided to make, then why threaten the rest of the league at all? You only suppress a market when the market is real. The Australia ultimatum exists because LeBron and Clutch didn't want Bronny ending up somewhere else. Dallas, Phoenix, Golden State, anywhere that wasn't Los Angeles. That tells you everything you need to know about intent. Then there's the contract. The 55th pick almost never gets a guaranteed multi-year NBA deal. Those players get two ways: G League reps, non-guaranteed looks. Bronny didn't. That doesn't happen by accident. It happens when leverage has already been applied. Clutch boxed the Lakers into a perfect setup. Bronny slides late, but arrives with enough leverage to demand real security. That requires coordination, conversation, agreement. There is no version of this where the front office just winged it. Shelburne's report hangs entirely on a semantic technicality. I don't think LeBron asked the Lakers to draft Bronny. In the world of high-level corporate power brokering, direct requests are rarely made because they are rarely needed. Explicit demands leave paper trails and create liability. In real power dynamics, people at LeBron's level don't need to ask. They signal. They create conditions. They make the alternative untenable. LeBron James operates through what can be termed implied mandates. He publicly stated for years that his final career goal was to play with his son. He holds the power to opt out of his contract and leave the team. He employs an agent who manages the team's other star, Anthony Davis. In this ecosystem, LeBron does not need to walk into Rob Pelinka's office and ask. He creates an environment where the only logical move for the franchise to retain him is to draft his son. Everyone in that building understands the stakes without anyone needing to say the quiet part out loud. Shelburne's reporting treats this absence of a formal, explicit request as evidence of passivity. This is a fundamental failure of analysis. It equates the lack of a signed permission slip with the lack of influence. Treating the absence of a literal request as proof of non-involvement is either naive or dishonest. Independent media clocked this immediately. It's PR cover, nothing more. The assertion that the Lakers drafted Bronny because they thought LeBron would like that paints the Lakers front office as amateurish. The NBA is a multi-billion-dollar business. Roster spots are scarce assets worth millions in potential production. General managers do not burn draft picks on gifts or nice gestures based on assumptions, especially when the downside is alienating your superstar if you guess wrong. If the Lakers front office acted solely on a guess, I think he'd like this. They were taking a massive risk. What if LeBron wanted Bronny to develop in a low-pressure environment like San Antonio? What if he thought Bronny wasn't ready? Drafting him without confirmation would be malpractice. The only logical explanation is that the guess was actually a confirmed understanding, that the Lakers already knew what the expectation was. That knowledge doesn't come from vibes. It comes through back channels, namely Rich Paul. Shelburne's report attempts to soften this into a heartwarming story of a franchise trying to please its star, but in doing so, diminishes the decision-making process of an NBA front office. The reaction to Shelburne's take highlights the eroding trust in ESPN. This demonstrates LeBron's control to spin the narrative is supported by the timing. The "he didn't ask" story surfaced after the draft. It is a narrative cleaned up for public consumption, and Shelburne served as the conduit. You can't separate this from LeBron's track record. To accept the idea that LeBron James had nothing to do with the Bronny draft, one must ignore 2 decades of documented, aggressive roster control. The shadow GM is not a myth. It is a description of an operational reality where LeBron James acts as a de facto general manager. The Bronny James draft is simply the latest chapter in a consistent volume of work. Perhaps the most damaging evidence against the passive narrative is the well-documented timeline of the Russell Westbrook trade. This is the same player who helped orchestrate the trade after hosting roster summits at his house. The same player who personally recruited Westbrook while the front office was lining up a Buddy Hield deal. If LeBron James is active enough to host summits, interview potential trade targets, and veto front office trades for veteran all-stars, the suggestion that he would be passive regarding the career-defining entry of his own son into the league is illogical. The war room precedent proves he is involved in the granular details of roster construction. The firing of Cleveland Cavaliers coach David Blatt in 2016 serves as another historical anchor. Despite Blatt leading the team to the NBA Finals and a top seed, he was terminated. LeBron's on-court behavior undermined Blatt's authority, creating an untenable environment that forced management's hand. This is the shadow GM/LeBron style. Create the conditions where the organization must act in your preferred direction, allowing you to maintain technical distance. The acquisition of Anthony Davis was a masterclass in agency-driven leverage, mirroring the Bronny James draft strategy but on a macro scale. The methodology is consistent. Identify, target, suppress external market, force destination, deny culpability. The Bronny James draft followed this exact flowchart. LeBron has never been hands-off with roster decisions, especially not ones that matter to him personally. Believing he suddenly checked out when his son entered the league requires ignoring 2 decades of precedent. What really stands out is how ESPN handled this. The network aired Bob Myers openly talking about Klutch's threats, then turned around and published articles framing LeBron as uninvolved. That contradiction isn't accidental. It's access journalism in action. Narratives get cleaned up to keep relationships intact. This shows how ESPN is not trustworthy. This pattern of behavior at the network, where the imperative to maintain relationships with stars and agents overrides the imperative to report the full truth. A specific incident involving LeBron James and the Lakers ownership sale perfectly illustrates this lack of integrity. In June 2025, the Buss family agreed to sell a stake in the Lakers to Mark Walter. Initial ESPN reporting by Ramona Shelburne and Brian Windhorst claimed that Luka Doncic was notified of the sale, but LeBron James was not given a heads up. This report painted a picture of a rift, a disconnect between the king and the franchise. However, shortly after publication, the article was quietly edited, a shadow edit, to reverse this claim. The text was altered to state that James was notified via his representation, Rich Paul. This reversal suggests that Klutch Sports or the Lakers contacted ESPN immediately after the initial story dropped to correct the narrative. Rather than issuing a formal correction or apology for the error, ESPN simply overwrote the text to align with the preferred version of events. If ESPN is willing to alter the historical record of its own reporting to appease a superstar's camp, their reporting on sensitive topics like the Bronny James draft must be viewed with extreme skepticism. It confirms that the network functions, at times, as a PR extension of the subjects it covers. The internal confusion at ESPN further degrades its credibility. While Shelburne pushed the LeBron didn't ask narrative, her colleague Brian Windhorst has frequently reported on the intense pressure LeBron exerts on organizations. The network airs segments detailing Rich Paul's aggressive Australia threats, Bob Myers, in the morning, and then publishes articles claiming LeBron had no involvement, Shelburne, in the afternoon. This schizophrenic coverage allows ESPN to play both sides, breaking the news of the power play while simultaneously curating the safe narrative for the player's brand. That small independent media is left to expose the truth. Imagine ESPN reporting an article called Lebiogenesis, or driving the narratives of nepotism and control. The Shelburne report attempts to portray the Lakers as sovereign actors. They did it on their own. However, evidence suggests a front office under siege, struggling to maintain dignity while capitulating to superstar demands. The Lakers were a mom and pop shop run by the Buss family, prioritizing legacy and star treatment over cold analytics. LeBron understands this institutional weakness perfectly. He knows that by making his dream public, he leverages the Lakers' own brand identity, the star-friendly franchise, against them. He didn't need to ask. He effectively checkmated them. The narrative presented by Ramona Shelburne, that LeBron James was a passive participant in the drafting of his son, is not merely incorrect. It is a distortion of reality that requires ignoring the fundamental mechanics of the NBA. The drafting of Bronny James was an operation, not a selection. To suggest otherwise is to insult the intelligence of every person on this planet. LeBron James and Klutch Sports successfully leveraged their immense power to bend the league to their will, and the independent decision of the Lakers was nothing more than the final signature on a contract written by the player himself. Either Ramona Shelburne has completely abandoned abandoned critical thought, or she assumes her audience has. Neither option reflects well on her. This isn't analysis so much as an insult to intelligence, and it's hard to believe Ramona Shelburne doesn't realize that. When a position is this weak, it raises an uncomfortable question. Is this incompetence, or is the bag worth your integrity? Like, subscribe, share, and maybe even hype the video. Let me know if you agree with Ramona Shelburne's brain dead position. Thanks for watching.